Don and we've been friends since elementary school. So we kind of lost touch with each other. And then probably for what, about 40 years. And so now we've
Wow.
had a chance to reconnect. And we never agreed on everything, of course, as young men. And now we're finding as we're older and have lived a good chunk of our lives and have had a chance to reconnect, we still don't agree on a lot of things. So, Don, welcome today. How are you feeling?
Doing well, Dennis. Doing well. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, regardless of whether we're
Oh,
agreeing
great.
or disagreeing.
Well, today we're asking a question that would have sounded almost absurd a few years ago. Is artificial intelligence pushing America towards socialism? OpenAI is reportedly interested in a closer relationship with the federal government, more regulation, public investment, and perhaps even some form of government ownership. You probably like this. But maybe not. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm a bit skeptical. Government support may sound attractive, but opens up a can of worms, so to speak. Um, Don, let me ask you, why should the government own part of an AI company?
Uh, well, the reason why I think perhaps it should is because of the revolutionary nature of AI when it comes to the workforce. It's entirely possible that AI could replace a large number of jobs, especially white collar jobs. But if you add in robots, perhaps quite a few blue collar jobs as well. So you could really have a revolution in terms of, the amount of people who are getting a wage uh, around the world. But certainly it'll be most impactful in the two countries that are really leading the way in AI right now, and that's China and the United States of America. So the thing is, how can you make the changes required to make up for the fact that there might be so many people not making a wage or having to transition to a job of much lower wage? Um, and obviously, that could create a lot of turmoil in the country, maybe even revolution, as it has in the past. We've previously talked about the Russian Revolution, and the bottom line is most revolutions, while they've got a trigger, they mostly occur because the have-nots have gotten exhausted with the current state. So we might have a lot of have-nots as a result of AI. And I think on the good news front, there are some within the AI Big Seven, if you will, um, that recognize that and recognize that something might have to be done. And so that's what I think Altman is saying. Now, is it a good thing? Well, it's a good thing they recognize there might be a problem and there might need something to be done. Is what he's talking about a good thing, or is socialism in general in the United States a good thing? What depends upon your point of view and how it would be implemented. Well, I certainly believe that some redistribution might be needed as a result of this coming revolution. Um, how to do it
Now, wait,
is
you just
important.
said when you said coming revolution, you talking about the AI revolution, or are you getting
Yeah, I'm talking about
political?
the AI revolution and perhaps the resultant revolution. But mostly I'm just talking about the AI revolution and what it'll do to the workforce.
Hmm.
So I think the US needs to be careful not to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. And that's capitalism and how it leads to this remarkable production of total output that's put the United States where it is today. And I think the U.S. has to be careful not to mess with the market's ability to do that. Once the market is done and the output is there, that is when I think if you're going to start socialist, quote unquote, type programs, that's where you should do it. So allow the output to be created, then redistribute the resultant wealth. If you try to do it on the front end and actually, you know, take ownership, over the means of producing capital, that has a tendency to reduce output and total wealth And so that would not be a good thing. I mean, if we're going to do this, what I'm trying to say is let's try to do it as optimally as possible. It's not going to be popular, clearly. The
Well,
other thing I'd like
let
to
me
say is,
ask
sure, go ahead.
let me ask you this. Do you want this market to become more mature? Because we're in the early stages of AI, and you called it a revolution. I don't think we're in a revolution yet. I think we're seeing some, even the productivity gains could be debated if we're really seeing real
Right.
productivity gains. Do you, well, number one, I also see a lot of disruption to the workforce. I use AI every day, and I'm like, Jesus, this made my job so much easier. And I'm not in the workforce right now, but I can imagine people are using it in the workforce. Having the AI perform a task for them, and then go to the water cooler for the rest of the day and stand around and because they just did a week's worth of work in 15 minutes. So, but eventually employers are going to figure out that, well, gee, we don't need all these people anymore. And they're going to, stop hiring new folks or let folks go.
Right.
And we really haven't seen that yet. I mean, unemployment numbers are still pretty strong. Employment figures are still strong. So when we talk about, say, taking ownership, government taking ownership, partial ownership in AI companies. What are you thinking? Are you waiting until this field matures more, and then you say once these companies are established, once we have winners, once we have losers, then the government starts stepping in and says, okay, we want our piece of the pie.
Well, I'm assuming you're asking Don, which is the
Yeah,
way this question usually is given to me. And my concern, while I wouldn't want to step in immediately, I do think the revolution is here. It's the very beginning, but companies are laying off, programmers and cyber engineers and folks that, used to be absolutely certain, if you had that skill set, you're hired, you got a lifetime job. You don't need to worry about it. I, so anyway, those folks are getting laid off. There are people using AI to do vibe programming. I think we talked about this in a previous episode. And the figure I heard was that one person doing vibe programming can do the work of 9 people. So you lay off 8, right? And some of that's occurring, and it's just going to get um, bigger because AI is getting better. And my concern is that AI is going to get better exponentially. Um, it's not just a concern; it's pretty much an
yeah.
accepted belief. So you've got to get on the front end, or you're going to be way behind. Um, it- you know, you could take the approach of, you know, you could just take the approach that we're going to solve it the way we've always solved it. So, for instance, the welfare state, right? So we've got a system in place to take care of people when they become unemployed. We're going to use that system. And if we have to pump more money into it, then fine, we'll pump more money into it. Well, that's certainly an approach, and it could work. Um, but it's problematic, as you know, because it would require large increases in taxes, probably, and to say nothing of the fact that the technology itself is disruptive, and according to most, and and I believe this as well, could be quite dangerous. So there's not only the fact that it'll disrupt the labor market, but also this is a technology that can be very dangerous. Um, it's not just your average code. It can produce unwanted results, and has shown an ability that's surprising to many, based on the way these models were created, which is just predicting the next word. That's what the models do. But it's shown an ability to not just predict the next word, but to do unexpected things that it wasn't asked to do. Um, you
Well,
know,
Don, before we head there to the
yeah,
dangers of AI, let's chase this rabbit down the hole of government ownership and
sure.
trending towards socialism. Um, and Tell me what you think. I mean, are we gonna take is government gonna take ownership, and when? This year, next year?
I well, first of all, to some extent, it already has. It's already taken on a review role. It's already making decisions about when things can be released and when they can't be released. So there's some of that
Uh-huh.
already occurring. So the question becomes true ownership or not, and should they? It's very hard for me, but I've discussed my inclinations already, and my inclination is that government ownership and in corporations might be a good thing, period. Just because the results of corporations, I don't think always aligns very well with what the population wants, and so a percentage of ownership in corporations, much less AI, might be a good thing. It would impart some of the morality and ethics into the invisible hand of the market, um, that that might help align corporate ambitions with the public more closely. Now, the other thing is that the reason why it might really be necessary is the fact that this is a dangerous and rapidly developing technology. And so, um, if you don't have ownership, it will be hard to steer it in the direction that you want to steer it, perhaps. Because, there are already open AI models. Altman has one of them. So there are already people out there that we don't know about that are developing models and maybe quite good ones. The only hard part about developing the model really is training it. You'd need access to a lot of data. That's a little harder to come by. But so my point is that, you know, um, there's going to have to be tight controls over AI. And I think the US is behind on doing that. And I think China is behind on doing that.
Well, let me ask you this. If the government owns a stake, uh, your incentive then becomes profitability. You know, you may be less inclined to regulate something that you have a stake in when the profits are looking good. You're going to say, okay, we have a government stake in this, and we're using it maybe to pay people that are now unemployed. And
Right.
then, oh, but we've got this danger. We need to shut it down. You're not going to shut it down. So
Well,
you're doing it's like it's the opposite effect of what you want. You say you want
it,
the government more involved, you want the government invested, you want the government nurturing these businesses, and then, oh, by the way, if we think it'll be safer because the government owns it. Maybe it'd be the opposite. We'd be less inclined to regulate it.
it could be. Um, it absolutely could be. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. The government could get a share and go, "Whoopee! I love having all this money," which, as we know, governments like having lots of money. Um, and so I'm just going to leave. I'm leaving. I'm going to leave them alone. They're doing a great job of making money, and so good. That's a possibility. And I'm not denying that, but the government also has other responsibility, and they do answer to the voters ultimately. And so hopefully that would work its way into the equation somehow. The figure that Altman came up with, we'd actually discussed previously, 10%, I think, ownership was what he was talking about. That's a good level because it's significant, but it's not controlling, right? But you don't ignore a 10% shareholder. Um, and
So
so, Right.
let me jump in here. So let's say where do we stop on this? Okay, we have OpenAI, they have ChatGPT, so we want 10% of ChatGPT. Anthropic has Claude. Do we want 10% of Claude?
Absolutely. I would think we would want
Okay.
a 10% interest in the entire AI industry. And Dennis, you've already
When you
touched
say
upon it,
okay,
and
let let's
it's good.
let's let's zero in on that, the entire
Yeah.
AI industry. So Microsoft makes operating systems. That's kind of their big revenue, but they
hmm
also have what I think they call it Copilot. So they have AI.
hmm
So what? Now we figure, okay, well, instead of 10% of Microsoft, we're going to own 4% because that's the percentage of AI in their company. And then we
You
just
know,
go across the board. And when do we stop? Do we go? we go only after the $1 trillion companies, or we go down to the $100 billion companies? Do we now go down to smaller companies? And now we're invested in this entire pool of AI companies as a government.
And it's
You're
and
okay with
it's
that?
am I okay with that? I'm okay with it. If that's what we decide to do, what I'm okay with, Dennis, is that we have to do something. Is this the something? I don't know, but I don't think it's a bad idea. But again, I think that's because of my inclination towards the fact that corporations have been given too many rights without seemingly any payback other than um, wealth creation. Now, I'm not saying wealth creation is nothing. It's certainly not,
Yeah.
but it's nearly nothing for 90% of the population. Um, so that's all I'm saying is I am inclined to put restrictions on corporations anyway. Um, and this is something that's being discussed by many people, including the folks who are creating AI. You know, Altman in particular, I'm a little cynical towards, um, because of course, he's doing Chat GPT. He's the open AI guy, but he's not exactly bleeding edge. And so some could say it's more difficult for him to raise the sort of funding that everyone else could. Um, and as a result, he would think that this makes him more competitive. And I think even the Wall Street Journal, which had an article on discussing this, said as much. Um, that this might be a cynical attempt on his part to become more competitive. Well, that's fine, but that doesn't make the underlying thought processes poor. Um, it just makes them, maybe not virtuous, you know. So anyway, something's got to be done. This is one possibility. He talked about putting the 10% into a sovereign wealth fund. That's another possibility that we've even discussed in the past. And at that point, basically, instead of it just only becoming, ownership, it becomes an asset of the United States of America, right? And certainly these AI models will be assets. The bigger question that I think you were also sort of hinting at is, okay, well, everybody's using AI, or they will be. If we take over 10% control of them too, they're going to be making the same sorts of decisions because of AI. So while they don't have the same danger because they're not a creator of the model, and so the model is the thing that can be dangerous. The results of the model, on the other hand, cause workforce friction, if you will. So should we take over them too? So should we just take over large corporations in general? By take over, I mean a 10% share, put it all into a sovereign wealth fund or something. And that sovereign wealth fund could then become the source of the funds needed to redistribute out to those who have become unemployed as a result of, AI. So, it certainly is a socialist model. I mean, but it certainly is not like a Marxist um, political sort of setup at all. But it is a socialist model, in that you're taking capital and you're putting it into the community, um, and having it partially owned by the community as opposed to strictly owned by you know private individuals themselves.
Well,
Uh,
let me ask you, Don, where does this stop? You kind of talked about it, but it's not clear in my mind. Where do
I,
you stop with this government interest of 10%? Anybody that has AI in their business plan is going to be a 10%, and then everybody's going to be bailing out, oh, I don't really use AI. Where do you stop?
yeah, I I don't have enough. I don't have access to the kind of data that like the Bureau of Labor and Statistics has, and they could probably figure out where it would make the most sense. Um, so I'm not, I'm not trying to, you know, I don't have an answer to that question, and it would just be
Would it
it would just be shooting in the
Well, but
dark for me to come
just
up with one. But
ballpark. Are we talking about 1,000 companies? Are we talking about
yeah, I
200
think we'd be talking
companies?
about certainly at least 1,000 companies.
At
So
least a
all of the
thousand
S&P
companies.
500 and some more. And what you wouldn't want to do is you wouldn't want to get in the way of small businesses because, of course, they're a big engine. Small businesses become large engines. I mean, large corporations. Um, so you'd want to put it somewhere where you think, the company has become established. Now the interest, the possibilities here are endless. Because maybe you start this and people go, well, I'm never going to be a public corporation. Then I'm not going to, I'll be owned privately. That way, this doesn't happen. So yes, there's millions of implementation decisions or hundreds of implementation decisions you'd have to make. But it's more about the underlying idea is this the type of thing that could solve the problem? I think it's one type of thing that could solve the problem. I'm sure it's not the only one. But it's one that's being discussed. It's being discussed by Altman. It's been discussed by the Anthropic guy. I've seen it
Yeah.
discussed by the leader of Google. The possibility of government ownership and the absolute requirement for government involvement in directing AI. You know, um, so
This to me, Don, it if I can jump in,
yeah,
uh we're talking winners and losers. Okay, so we're going to pick the winners, or we're going to pick the ones that we want interest in. That starts me thinking, oh, too big to fail. It's going to be like the banks. So the next big crisis that comes around, and who knows what this crisis is going to be, a data center crisis, a security crisis, a war of some sort where AI was used, and now, or a stock market crash. And now we're
those are the
saying,
top
oh,
four.
well, yeah, thank you. And now we're saying, oh, well, OpenAI is too big to fail now. We have an interest in it. So then what? Then we prop it up with what? With government debt and say, okay, well, we're going to save OpenAI. We're going to save Anthropic. Uh, Facebook to put too much emphasis on AI and now they're going under. Every people have lost their life savings now. With huge crash in the stock market. Oh, now we need more government involvement. And
You were talking about the crises. That's a known crisis. That's a sunk cost from my point of view. Okay. They're already too big to fail, right? And we're going to prop them up regardless. And history has shown that. So whether you've got a 10% ownership stake or not isn't going to change that at all, in my opinion. But what it will change, if it's done properly, is maybe you can put some risk aversion into their leadership that wouldn't be there without that 10% ownership. When you got people running the company or making the kinds of money they're making every single quarter, that's more than enough money to live on for the rest of your life, right? They're willing to take those risks. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? The good thing is you're willing to take that risk. And so things like rockets that come back and land on the earth, and get reused can happen. But the bad thing is that they come up with very risky behaviors and then they're so big that they influence the entire economy. But that's not new. That's going to exist whether we take 10% ownership or not. So the question is, would 10% ownership perhaps help? And it might. I don't see it hurting other than just from the financial point of view of you've taken 10% of the capital in the U.S. and it's exchanged hands, or perhaps you've diluted. If it doesn't exchange hands, then you just dilute the share price by 10%, and you create more shares until the government owns 10%. However you want to have.
yeah. Um, Here's my I guess even backing up a little bit
Hmm.
more than AI has come along at a time when interest in socialism is gaining ground, or socialists are gaining ground on the political scene in America and in
Yeah.
other places around the world. But the one I'm most concerned about is America.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not a fan of it at all. I think I've expressed
Uh,
that before. I'm not a
yeah.
fan of communism. I'm not a fan of socialism. I'm not a fan of collectivism. which is a term I tend to use, where you aggregate and enforce political will at higher and higher levels as this collective group, and you take power further and further away from the people into, I don't like the word elite, it's overused, but you instill government political power at higher and higher levels, more detached from the people it affects.
Yeah.
And this AI, I mean, we kind of go back to that Russian Revolution, which is very intriguing to me, from 1917, because that's when the Industrial Revolution was kicking off. It had been in force, but we were really starting to see, with the steel mills and the locomotives, and cars were on the scene at that point. And they're saying, my God, look at all this money and wealth that's going to be created. And now they're saying the same thing about AI. They go, oh my God, AI is amazing. All the productivity gains, all the wealth that's being created. And now, and then Lenin comes along and says, we're going to tap into that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lesson learned 100 plus years later is a bad
Yeah.
idea. And you're
Yeah.
talking about, we got to do something. We got to do something. We see
Yeah.
that this wealth is going to be created, and we see a lot of people are going to be left behind. And now we need to collectivize this whole system. And
Not
to
exactly.
me, that's dangerous, Don.
No, I understand, and certainly, I think it's dangerous too. I don't think that it's not like I think government's going to do a great job at running corporations. Quite the opposite. I'm pretty positive they won't.
Well, you
Um,
never said they were going to
but
run the corporation. You're going to and take,
they're going to have a percentage of ownership, so they're
partial
going to
ownership and
right,
influence these companies, but they wouldn't run the companies.
R- right. But when you've got 10% ownership, you're going to become one of the people that assists in running the company. So, um, and do I think that's a great thing? No, not necessarily, but I mean, actually, I kind of don't. Uh, but at 10%, as I said, you're not a majority holder. And as I said, uh, corporations are already, you know, a public entity of sorts. And all I'm saying is that you introduce more of the public into it via the government. Um, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea. And I don't have any great alternatives in terms of how to control AI without having true control. Ownership is control. I don't want complete ownership. I think it'd be a terrible idea. Then you kill the golden goose. That, then you're trying to direct economy, which is far too complex for a single entity to handle. That's where things start to fall apart, right? Let the market work. The market knows what's required. Supply and demand's going to handle it. I think that's the way it ought to continue to occur. But the market is going to change. And just as in the Industrial Revolution, those changes are going to, it's going to create a lot of wealth, just like the Industrial Revolution. And just like the Industrial Revolution, the wealthy are going to be the ones that get the vast majority of the wealth, which led to a little thing called the Great Depression, among other things, right? Um, and
Well, okay,
so,
I'm not going to
so we
let you
can
slip
learn from
that
our
in,
we can
Don.
learn from our
Don,
past. Yeah.
I'm not going to let you slip in the Great Depression as an
Okay.
argument against capitalism. Uh, well,
Oh, I'm not arguing
let's.
against capitalism at all. I mean, you missed my point. I'm a huge capitalist. I Capitalism is the thing that's going to maximize output. But what I am is, I don't think that capitalism has to be the end of the game. Um, Capitalism has shown repeatedly it's not. you know, the invisible hand, the way it is implemented in the United States of America, does not work the way that Adam Smith intended it to.
Well,
Okay,
who cares
there are
about Adam
portions of it
Smith?
missing. So, well, all I'm saying
Okay,
is the
so it's
creator of
not a perfect.
capitalism.
Okay, the imperfections of the capitalist system are nothing compared to the imperfections of a collectivist system. So if you're pointing out capitalism's problems, Jesus, it's like I don't even have a good metaphor for this. I mean, you treat these limitations or uh, deficiencies almost equally, and there's history has shown that capitalism and collectivism aren't in the same ballpark as far as what it does for people.
Sure. I don't know if you could take it quite that far, but certainly what it does for overall output, for sure. Absolutely. Agreed. But that's not my point. My point isn't that capitalism isn't the best. My point is it doesn't mean that you can't make capitalism better, you know?
Well,
Um,
I don't think
by
my opinion.
redistributing.
This is my opinion. Okay,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think taking ownership 10%, 5%, 50, you start at 5%, then it goes to 10%. Next thing you know,
Right.
you're at 15%. A crisis comes along. Well, we bailed out OpenAI, so now we own 20% of the company. We hope we get our money
Right.
back. So
We've been down this rabbit hole before. Okay, so this isn't the solution. So what is? We can
well,
do
let
but
me
the
talk.
experts. Oh yeah, go
Maybe
ahead.
we take it. Okay, taxes. Let's say
Okay.
let's let these
Immensely
um
unpopular.
okay, but your idea 10% is not exactly popular with a lot of people either.
Nope, certainly not. It's
Let's
going to have
say
the same problem.
here's my here's how I would go about it. I would say, okay, this AI industry is still very new. We
Yeah.
have these names, and it's interesting. We have these established companies, multi-trillion dollar companies, the Microsoft, the Meta, which is Facebook, um, and Amazon with their deep pockets, and then you have these other. You have OpenAI, who's basically running on debt and promise of the future, hoping it's the next Amazon. I think
Yeah.
Anthropic is pretty much the same. They're a new company using a
Yeah,
lot of debt.
about to be gigantic though. But
Yeah,
yeah.
but they're a very debt oriented company.
Yeah.
And so to me what's interesting is I want to see where what happens when the dust settles on this phase of AI that we're in. Is OpenAI and Anthropic, they're the kind of the two big boys right now. I think you could say Google with Gemini is up there as well. Anthropic has a lot of momentum right now. I would like to see the dust settle before the government makes big plans with these companies uh, regarding a sovereign wealth fund or ownership. I mean,
Gotcha.
I would wait and see. I would have a more hands-off approach. I know it's dangerous. This AI can do very bad things. Well, everything is dangerous. I get in a car and drive to the store. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
I would be more hands-off, and then I would say, okay, uh, OpenAI is going into incredible debt, hoping that they are the next big thing, and they might be, they might not be. And I would wait to find out. And if they are, okay, then guess what? We realize that this model that was put out, this ChatGPT and this Claude and these others, have displaced a lot of workers. And
Yeah.
so we're going to find a way to tax the profits of this company, as unpopular as that might be. And but this is kind of a counter to your
Yeah.
taking over idea and owning part of the
Uh,
company, is saying, okay,
uh,
we're gonna tax this company now. We're gonna
yeah.
OpenAI is incredibly profitable now. And I'm talking about maybe 6, 7 years down the road.
Yeah.
And now, why are they incredibly profitable? One reason is because the government didn't get involved with them and stifle innovation. This is still, remember, this is not oil fields of Norway, Don. This is a
Yeah. Yeah.
this is a fast moving innovation is
Yeah.
key quick decision making, getting out in front of your competitors. We're not looking at oil fields in Norway and saying, okay, we're going to tap into that, and that's going to be a sovereign wealth fund. This is much more dynamic, and so I would let the dust settle and then find, okay, and see where we come out on the other side. See what unemployment looks like in 5, 6, 7 years, maybe 3 years. Maybe it's going to happen a little bit faster than what I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
then we kind of we get a dividend to the citizens. We use antitrust, so we have competition, so prices stay low. We don't have a monopoly, which that's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. We've let these monopolies kind of become established in these tech companies and
Yeah.
stifled innovation. I won't go down that rabbit hole right now, but I would put that as a counter to uh, this
It's
plan, whatever you Altman's plan, this
yeah.
socialist plan, this collectivism plan. Let the free market run and let it run until we've figured out where the chips are going to lie.
Well, I couldn't couldn't agree more. I mean, the whole the whole reason, um, I think anyway, the whole reason why uh, I was thinking a sovereign wealth fund might work is because it smacks less of the word socialism, and therefore, it's just different ownership in a corporation, and so therefore, maybe the American public wouldn't revolt about it. Um, Same thing with taxes. The simple solution is, well, why not just use the system we've got set up now? Well, I mean, Dennis, I agree. It can be solved with taxes. That's no problem, and that's definitely the easy button. And great, but all I hear in politics for the last 40 years is how to cut taxes. So, yeah, you try to raise taxes, but then everyone's going to start beating the war drum for cutting taxes, and up and up and up and up goes the debt. So that's my concern there is just how do we make this palatable to the American public? You know, I I don't want to kill capitalism, and like I said, I don't think 10% ownership of the government in these companies is going to kill capitalism at all. It's just changing part of the ownership.
I think
And
it,
not the majority ownership at all or anywhere near. So it's like
well, Don, I
you make it
think, as I
significant but
said, I
not
mean, it
controlling.
starts, it starts at 5%, it starts at 10%, then it's 15, then the crisis comes, then it's
Same thing with
20.
taxes. You start at 10% tax to try to pay for it, but then it gets cut to 7, then it gets cut to 5, and then it gets eliminated.
I don't see,
And
I
then
don't
and then
see
there goes your
taxes.
debt again.
I don't, I don't know what world you live in. I don't see taxes
It's
being
all
cut. I see
oh, you
taxes
gotta be
going
kidding
up.
me. Oh, please, please, Dennis,
When
go
is
out
your sales tax? When
and
has your sales tax ever gone down, Don?
those are those are local taxes. But talk talk about federal, tax rates, and they've gone down for decades now. So,
Okay,
and
well,
my point is that how are
I
you gonna
can't.
go ahead?
Okay, if
How are you
all
gonna
right, we're talking
pass
about
this
AI,
through the
but
oops.
AI affects economics, and this is where we disagree. Okay,
Yeah.
we're talking. I think you're talking about mainly about income tax.
No,
Probably talking
I'm
mainly.
talking about overall taxes, and certainly corporate taxes are not income taxes, although they could be because they're
Well,
roughly the
let's
same. But
zero in on income taxes. Okay, and let's you're
okay,
because
but that's got less to do sort of
when
with the problem. But
the
you know,
big income tax cut was when Reagan Reagan administration, where income taxes for high income earners was way up there. I want to say over
yeah,
70%. Um, and then the Reagan Revolution brought those down in, I think, the high 30s, maybe low 40s, something like that.
yeah,
Uh, which, in my opinion, is a range of taxes that's appropriate. Uh, and we've bounced around in that territory for the last 40 years. Uh, with going from 41% down to 36% for high income earners. And you act like that's not that much. And then it got bumped up a little bit under Obama, and then it came back down a little bit. I don't know what it is right now. I think it's in the high 30s. Tell me, am I wrong on that?
I don't know what the highest one is at all, but I just know that overall the effective tax rate has been falling for, and I don't mean always falling, as you pointed out. Sometimes it's gone up a little, sometimes it's gone down, but the overall trend has been going down for quite a while, and our effective tax rate is pretty low. And the reason for that is because that's what the American public wants. And that's my point about using the taxes to solve the problem is I don't think the American public will have it. So we got to come up with a solution that the American public will actually allow
Well, I don't think we want to
and will
go back
stick,
to
you know.
85% income tax rate on the highest income earners.
Oh God, no.
We don't want to do that.
But I don't think that's what you were
And
saying. I
as
mean,
far as, it's okay. There's a lot of expenses that people have in America, and taxes are part of that. You rarely you property taxes never go down. Sales
you
taxes
didn't
never
know.
go down.
Uh,
Um, all the other expenses that we have, insurance is going up. Um, and okay, let's say we'll use Germany as an example. Okay,
mhm.
you're living in a very nice country there, Germany. But what has Germany done to their taxes are
Very,
exorbitant for
very high.
income taxes. And what does that do? That
And a VAT tax on
disincentivizes
top of it.
people. It disincentivizes people to work. I think Germany is in a bad boat. It's in a sinking boat right now as far as people wanting to go out there and work when they can stay home and the government will cover their expenses. And because they're getting taxed to death over there, we don't want to do that. I certainly don't want to get taxed to death. But when I have to choose between the two poison pills, which is government ownership, which increases this government involvement, increases this collectivism, and then you've got the all the other second and third order effects when government starts getting more and more and more involved in things. And so I'm very against that. But if I have to choose the poison pills, I would look at antitrust so we don't get the monopolies, keep the competition instilled and keep the competition strong, and then look at taxes as a way to when you what's the term the socialists use, spread the wealth, um
Oh, redistribution of wealth. Yeah.
redistribution, spread the wealth. So I'm just I I see where you're
Well,
coming from, Don. I'm
I,
just looking at what I've seen in my life, and as I look back in history, anytime you get the government more involved, and this Sam Altman recommendation, or I don't know if it's a recommendation more as a thought uh, that he put out there to think that the government should take a stake in these artificial intelligence companies, just rubs
mhm.
me the wrong way.
No, no, and I think, like I said, I think it's a natural American reaction. So, but I think one of those two ways is probably going to be the way this thing ends up falling out is either you take ownership or you tax. And so it's going to come down to which one taxpayers want. Not taxpayers, citizens want. It's going to come down to what they tell the politicians to do. Because neither one of them's going to, I don't think it'll be particularly popular. But
Yeah,
I think
and
doing nothing is a real danger. I think you might be able to do nothing for a year or two, but I think that's really stretching it. I think
yeah,
things are going to move much more quickly than that, and the Big Seven thinks things are going to move more quickly than that.
yeah, I think you're right there, Don. And this is where I think maybe both of us are missing the point here in that this is the tsunami, we've kind of used that word before,
Yeah.
and we're just not ready for what's going to happen. Taking a 10% ownership in the company probably isn't, in my opinion, is not the right answer. It introduces many more second and third order effects that are detrimental that will only hurt us. And taxing them isn't. tax what? I mean, increase marginal tax rate somewhat. That doesn't really get at it either. And especially when you have all these people that are in white collar jobs, that are no longer working, and they want to have food on their plates, and
Yeah,
we're a government already in extreme debt.
yeah,
And so I'm not maybe I think we're probably missing something here. I don't think we don't have a system that really
yeah.
responds to this tsunami.
R- Uh, oh, completely. I completely agree about that. Um, and that's where I've discussed before how a more directed economy might have an advantage when it comes to dealing with a crisis of this magnitude. It might not. Um, but, you know, these are the two ideas that I've heard floated, you know. Um, I've tried to do some reading, tried to, listen to podcasts, watch, YouTube, etc. Just, look at what both sides are talking about. These seem to be the ideas that people keep coming up with is, you can either handle it through the normal avenues of taxation or you can handle it through something that's, um, you know, a little different, but, are out there. There are some large sovereign funds out there. So it's not completely new territory, but it certainly is using it in a different way. And as you said, it would have second, third order consequences. But anything you do is going to have it's a severe issue, so there are going to be severe impacts. It, there's no getting around it. And
Yeah.
yeah, as I said, this isn't you know while Don's got ideas on what he thinks might work better. Don's overarching idea is like you, I love the United States of America and I want it to succeed. And I see something coming that is particularly you know, it's going to be particularly difficult for the U.S. to deal with because of the fact that any sort of socialization it's been demonized for so long in America that it's going to be hard to get it through. And even taxation, I think, to some extent, is seen as you know socialism because so often the taxes end up going to these days actually taxes don't go to the welfare state, taxes go to paying off the debt. um, but the point is that taxes are demonized and so is socialism. And so, okay, how are you going to raise the revenues? How are you going to, well, you won't have to raise the revenues. Actually, you'll be filthy, you know, in wealth. But what are you going to do for the people who aren't working? What are you going to do for all those wages that aren't coming in? You're talking about income taxes. Well, lots of the wages are going to be gone. So, income taxes are going to, you would think would go down. So it's more, I think you'd have to solve it through taxation on corporations as opposed to on, you know, or you can just change the rule, which has been discussed before, and simplify the whole thing and just say, hey, since corporations are people too, then when corporations make money, it's income too, and just simplify the tax system. And you could both raise more taxes that way and cut expenses because, you wouldn't need so many people to do, you know, the auditing, tax advisors. Of course, don't get me wrong, then you're laying off tax advisors. I mean, yeah, I know. But you just said, you down the rabbit hole you go, but it's going to be a big problem. And what are we going to do? Those are the only two things I've seen discussed, taxation and sovereign wealth. Well, and not just sovereign wealth, but ownership, right? Those seem to be the ways
Yeah.
that people think
Yeah.
you can handle the employment impact. The one thing that the ownership does is it also provides the control that's required or helps to assist in the control that you think is going to be required to keep these things from going off the rails in a dangerous direction. Yeah, I
Well,
don't
Don,
know.
I hope
This isn't my,
we
career.
yeah. We are we we are maybe it's we're older now. Maybe if we were 18, we'd be looking at we're driving around the city of Lynchburg in your old 65 Mustang,
Yeah.
and AI was coming out, we'd probably be looking at all the possibilities and all the good things that were going to come out of this. And now we're in our 60s, so maybe we're a little more, we're not as optimistic. I hope that's not the case, but maybe that is.
Uh,
Maybe it's just a reality of being older. Um, and I hope, well, I don't want to say hope. We are both very, very concerned about the future, not in that AI won't give us amazing benefits, amazing discoveries,
Right.
um,
It will.
but it will. We're not it, but it's that it's going to be such an upheaval to society, in particular, what happens to all the people, all these brains that are no longer needed. What do these brains do?
Whole,
And
whole, whole different problem, and which we haven't even discussed, which would be a really
yeah,
fascinating discussion. But with
yeah.
great power
Well,
comes
I'd
great
like,
responsibility, right?
yeah,
AI is going to have great
yeah.
power.
So we'll see. I hope we're dead wrong about all this, and we're just and in 20 years they'll look at these videos and say, well, look at these two old guys. They were all worried about what was going to happen
Yeah.
with AI. We're just living the best
What?
lives ever, and they're no longer around, and they were doomsdayers, and but life
Um,
is grand. I hope
like
we're wrong. But here's the thing too
20 years from now, I'm
is
just going to be bits.
yeah, these will be
Although
avatars. This
maybe we
won't be
already
real people.
are, but that's a different discussion too.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, but here's the thing too. This very significant moment in time is coming along when our country has not prepared for it. We've gone into deeper and deeper debt. I'm a guy who does watch the debt clock.
Yeah,
39 plus trillion. We're getting
me
closer to
too.
$40 trillion.
Yep.
Back in 2010 or so, we were at 10 trillion. So it took us, what, 16 years? So let's say it takes 17 years
Yeah.
to pick up. We were at 10 trillion in around 2010, and let's say we're at 40 trillion. So that's $30 trillion of debt. We tripled the amount. We went from 10 to 40, and we did it in, say, 17 years.
Yeah.
And where's that? Where's that? What do we have to show for it? Do we have the best
Uh,
airports, the best train stations, the best highways, the best technology? What do
I
we
don't
have to
know
show
about the
for it?
best
We have,
highways.
yeah. Well, we've got some pretty darn. We have some
we
good
got,
ones. I've
we're
I've seen a
okay.
lot
Yeah.
worse in countries I've been to. I've
Yes.
seen a lot
That's,
worse, much
that's
less
true.
impressive. Um,
True.
but we're we're not in the best position from a financial
No,
standpoint. I won't even
which
get
was,
to the societal issues right now, but
uh,
we're not in the
yeah,
best position.
which is what everybody said back when this kept happening, when we kept running larger and larger and larger debts. Is my concern wasn't the total debt. It is now. My concern was what happens when we really need money? I mean,
Hmm.
states, like Virginia has a rainy day fund. They run a surplus. Do they give it all back? No, they keep it in a rainy day fund. And so next year, when it's a bad year, they don't have to turn around and raise taxes and everything. Now, it doesn't always work, but at least it's something. There's no rainy day fund for the federal government, and God knows it's been pouring for a long time now, And so, like you're saying, we are ill suited for this problem right now. It's, it's, it's certainly bad timing both from a societal point of view and from a financial point of view. I agree.
All right, Don. Well, thanks for conversation today. I appreciate it.
Man, thanks for getting together again. I appreciate it as well.